Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Assen played host as round 11 of the MotoGP World Championship, and what a race the Dutch TT delivered. Dominance, heartbreak, rain, penalties, and comeback rides. It had nearly everything, and we're here to discuss it all as we head into MotoGP's summer break. The recording date is Monday, the 27th of June. My name is Harry Benjamin. Joining me, as usual, is Crash MotoGP editor Pete McLaren and former Grand Prix rider and British champion Keith Huewen. Now, it's been a busy weekend, I think, for all of us, not just MotoGP-wise, but of course, you would have seen it, I'm sure, across social media and online, the Goodwood Festival of Speed occurring across the weekend. Keith Huewen, we actually met in person the first time in over a year of doing this. We've done it. Still not met Pete yet, so he could be 6'8", he could be 5'1", no idea. But Keith, Goodwood, you were a busy man. Lots of cars, lots of bikes as well.
Yeah, and it's confirmed you are tall. You walked past our commentary position. I was on the second floor and you could still look in. So yeah. Harry is a tall fella. Yeah, the Festival of Speed, I've only just been able to say it right after slurring for the last 20-odd hours. It's been a hell of an event. I mean, majored on motorcycles this year. The Duke of Richmond, put together a massive event as he does, and his team down at Goodwood. But the big highlight for all of us, and I think even car people, was Wayne Rainey coming back onto his 92 championship winning, the bike, by the way, the bike. Yamaha prepped it it was a static display, and they prepped it so it was a proper runner and all the rest of it. And believe me, a 30-year-old machine, that takes a lot of doing, especially a full factory one like it is, because there ain't a lot of bits hanging around for them after all these years. So Wayne Rainey arrives, and he's the man I remember him to be every time I see him. I mean, his family was there, Shay, his wife, Rex, his son, and Skylar, his, I was going to say daughter then. I'm still very jaded, I have to say, his wife. It was full family Rainey, and we were all a bit kind of concerned about the thing. I mean, I know it's only a straight line. It's only 1.1 miles the hill. But the preparation to get a guy that's not ridden the bike since he rode it 30 years ago to win the world title. He won in 1991 and 92, two-stroke, no electronics, no controls over any of that kind of stuff. And these are a bit zippy, these things, 2,500 RPM, something like power band. And I remember just how sharp they are. Paralysed from the chest downwards, so he has no feeling from the chest downwards. He had Shimano, the push bike, Shimano clips attached to his boots, so they clipped onto the pegs, strapped his knees, had a tank cushion, if you like, so he could feel the vibration of the bike through the top half of his chest. And then obviously hand controls. The stop button, the kill switch, which would normally be a kill switch, clicked it up a gear, and every time he pulled the clutch, it went down a gear. Now, that meant it was a fair bit of thinking to be done as well. Obviously, he's very strong in his arms, because that's what tends to happen. His upper body stays very, very strong, because that's how he gets himself about in and out of chairs and whatever. But the wonderful thing about Wayne, he's still the same guy he was when I interviewed him for Sky Television after his accident back in the end of 92. It wasn't 90, actually 93, beginning of 93, just after he'd had that accident. And he's still very mild, very focused, though, on what he wanted to do and what he wanted to achieve. And it's always, the mechanics of it. Howard Gregory, a mate of mine from years ago, one of the techs that worked on Ron Aslam's bike, on the Britain bikes, Team Roberts, some of the guys that you see at the Festival of Speed, you haven't seen in decades. And they were prepping the bike from the Paget's team were there, the Malenko by Paget's team were looking after the Yamaha as well, and Nambasan, the Japanese guy that came across with the bike to oversee it, lovely fella. In fact, there's one brilliant shot of when they had to have one guy that was on the front, Tony what was his surname? Mashita. He was on the front, and he'd hold the bike steady. Howard Gregory would fire it up from the back with the starter. Nambasan was at the back ready to push him off, and there was a couple of guidance either side, And the launch was the most important part, because obviously if it had gone off a bit wrong, by the time he feels it where he needs to feel it, we're already heading in the wrong direction. So it really was critical to get that right. And if you look at the first launch, if you do watch it online, try and watched the one where he goes up the hill on his own. I think it must have been on Thursday. And Nambasan, the Japanese guy, I've never seen him. He was break dancing behind as Wayne got halfway up to turn one. He's jumping about and he's clapping. He's so happy that this launch has gone so well straight away. And it was just a fantastic. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in there. If I never have to commentate on anything ever again, I will feel okay about that, because to see Wayne, get more and more confident as well. He popped a few wheelies in the last one as well, only little ones, but I'll tell you what, it's a big deal. And thanks to the Duke of Richmond for facilitating all of those guys. There were little creaks here and there that I can say from behind the scenes that some of the guys in Parc Fermé didn't really understand perhaps what Wayne needed from a logistical point of view. A bit more room, please, gents. I know it's a motorbike and we can get it through a kitchen door, but the fact is that he needed a bit more room around him to do the manoeuvring. The tech crew that were looking after everything needed to be in front of the bike as well as behind the bike when we went up the hill to the top. All those things, though, worked out to this crescendo of Wayne pulling 3 or 4 wheelies up the hill with Kevin Schwantz, Mick, Doohan, Kenny Roberts Sr., who is remarkable when he's had half a bottle of wine, I have to say. Kenny Roberts Sr., you just can't stop him from it. And if anybody wonders what was wrong with him one day down on the grid before we all left up the hill, I think it must have been, was it Saturday morning, the first run? Honestly, it must have been the leftovers from the night before, because Kenny was on it. He was pushing Kevin Schwantz about, he was pushing Mick Doohan about. Then we had Jeremy McWilliams that joined us as well. Of course, Jeremy McWilliams has got great history with most of those guys and with the teams. The KR3 was there, the 3-cylinder development bike that Kenny Roberts developed, somewhat out of date, really, because obviously it went to MotoGP around the time that he and Proton developed that thing. So still a sharp machine, though. And again, Roberts, he got it lit up at one point, and I thought he was going into the bales. It was quite funny. I mean, Doohan was probably the most subdued out of the bloody lot of them. Everyone else was on Festival of Speed party mode, I think. One of the things to come out of it that was very interesting was that Wayne hadn't really told the family what he was planning. Half the plans had gone through before he actually told his wife what he was doing, which was quite amusing when he let that one go. Bearing in mind, Shay was behind me when he was saying it on air, on television. But a great event. I mean, if you've never been to the Festival of Speed, it's one of those ones. It is bloody expensive, I have to say. £5 for an ice cream and God knows what for a burger, but and that's without your entries. But you are never going to see the things you see in one place. You're never going to be able to touch, smell, and absorb what's going on. You're never going to be able to talk to the likes of Wayne Rainey, sat by his bike, talking to anybody who wants to talk. And that's the same with all of the riders that were there. The access is incredibly good. So I would highly recommend it. It is expensive, so don't expect to be going there on the cheap. And you do need to be there early. But you need to be there early not just to miss the traffic. You need to be there early because you ain't going to get it all done in one day, unless you've got a weekend ticket, of course. Then that'll designate you as really rich.
No, I was only there on the Thursday, and I could not get. I think I only saw half of it, if that. There was so much to see, but I mean, especially Wayne Rainey going up the hill, that was something special to witness if you were there, or indeed just seeing it online as well. It was amazing to watch. And just lastly as well, of course, you had a balcony moment with somebody called Agostini, who's I hear pretty good on a motorbike.
Giacomo Agostini. I mean, he's the guy that went from 4-strokes MV Augustas into 2-strokes. In the Grand Prix series. He was the first ever 2-stroke winner on a 500cc Yamaha. So, he was 15 times a world champion. You'll love a stat because I know what you like, you anorak type journos. I mean, he won a world title for every letter in his name. 15 of them, you see, if you count. That's how I always remember how many he's won. He won 8 500cc Grand Prix titles and 7 350cc Grand Prix titles. He's as smooth as they come. Delightfully elegant as an Italian, and when he's got all his gear on and he's on that MV, you think, oh, that's how it should be. It's just oozes class. Still a great man. And that balcony moment, as you say, rode across the gravel driveway under the BMW display, which was magnificent as ever in front of Goodwood House, into the lobby of Goodwood House, which is quite magnificent in itself. And then wanders up and meets some tosser on the top of the stairs called Huewen. Again, And the story behind that as well is that I know Agostini. I've known Ago for a long time because back in the day when I was very, very young, there was a time, and he sent me a message. I think it was a fax because back then we didn't have internet. I don't think.
How old are you?
Quite old now, I have to say, and feeling it after this weekend. And he summoned me to Milan, and I'd never been to Italy. And basically, he was trying to hire me for the Grand Prix team back in the day when I was quite reasonable on a bike. And but basically, I spent all my time in a hotel room. Ordering food that I didn't understand what it was because I'd only been brought up on fish and chips, and never ever saw him. I got a message that came and said that terribly sorry, but we don't need your services now. So what he'd done is he brought me out there, crafty old bugger, brought me out there just to make sure that he got the signatures signed that he needed to get signed for that year's team because there were one or two people kind of balking at it. So he flew me out as a decoy. Huewen's coming to Milan, and if you don't sign, we're going to sign him, kind of thing. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but it was all right. He's Ago after all, so yes. He doesn't. Strangely enough, he doesn't remember it that way.
No, I can imagine. I mean, what a brilliant weekend, though. Amazing stuff. If you're lucky enough to get there or watch it, it's well worth trying to get to next year if you're able to. Well, while all that was going on, though, of course, it was another MotoGP race weekend, wasn't it? The last before a bit of a break until Silverstone, and we talked about Agostini. It was another Italian, wasn't it? Francesco Bagnaia claimed a dominant win in Assen in the end. With Aleix Espargaro, though, producing arguably, I mean, he made me scream out loud at one point, the ride of maybe his career to finish fourth after being crashed into early doors by title rival Fabio Quartararo. Maverick Vinales taking his first podium for Aprilia. Marco Bezzecchi on the podium as well. It was drama from the very start, too, in what was an absolutely excellent Grand Prix. Wasn't it, Keith? What did you make of it?
Well, it was a start that counted at the end of the day. I thought Quartararo, it's a very rare mistake from Quartararo, but a very silly one, really. He came from a bit too far back, a bit too early on in the race. I mean, I think he was aware of what was going on, and Bagnaia had pace, so he didn't want him to disappear up the road. In the end, it cost him dearly. But I think he just looked a little rattled early on in that he didn't settle in that first couple of laps, and I think that was pretty evident. Bagnaia had got the start that he should have got. You're absolutely right about Aleix Espargaro. Anybody that hasn't watched it yet, you should. But if you haven't watched it, then basically Bagnaia Quartararo took Aleix out at Distruben, I think it was, and it turned 5, that horseshoe left-hander. But it was from quite a long way back. He was a little wide on the way in anyway, so he was in there hot. And I think that says more about Aleix than it does about Quartararo, in that Aleix was so fast that Quartararo misjudged him. And I think that's the key here is that Aleix is on such a pace now that I think even the likes of the mercurial Frenchman have misjudged him slightly. And the ride that he had to come to where he came to, that final, Assen always delivers into that last chicane because it's approached from a massively fast left-hander. You line it all up a couple of corners before, and if you've got the momentum, then you get up the inside. But to get up the inside of two MotoGP riders of the quality he did, to make the pass on two men in the last chicane, to finish fourth, and therefore put himself a huge jump in more points towards Quartararo's lead, and it's been trimmed by a considerable margin now. It's just fantastic. It's great for the series, but I think you're right, Harry, in what you said. I think it was the ride of his career, and I think he's going to go on to greater things from that ride. He really is a believer now. He'll win Silverstone, by the way.
Oh, will he now? Will he? Well, I suppose, question is, Pete, if he hadn't been taken out, could Aleix have won in Assen?
On paper, undoubtedly. I mean, because he lost, I think it was about 9 or 10 seconds when he got pushed into the gravel, and he finished, 2.5 seconds behind. So, of course, there's the raindrops, so, and Bagnaia is racing the guy in second. But still, if you're looking at on paper, I mean, yeah, the speed was there. The ironic thing, isn't it, though, is that if that incident hadn't happened, he might have gained 5 points on Quartararo by winning the race. Quartararo would have finished second. Instead, what happens is they have the incident, and as Keith says, he gains 13 points. Gaining 13 points on Quartararo is no easy thing. So it was a bit of a kind of a bittersweet thing for Aleix. He did say afterwards that, you know what, I've only won one race though. I think I'd prefer to get the second win, but come the end of the season, those 13 points could prove very welcome, couldn't they?
Put him right there. Of course, the problem with that question, Harry, is could he have won it? Is what would Bagnaia have been able to do about him being on his tail? That's always the question. Bagnaia is riding to win the race at the minimum risk. If Aleix is coming into the equation and catching him, then I think at one point Bagnaia did increase his pace considerably when he was being closed down a little bit, and I think that's the mark of the guy at the moment. He's got pace as well. Having said that, Bagnaia could be quite nervous because he's fallen out of some fairly decent positions, and if he had pushed any harder, maybe he could have been forced into another error.
Quite possibly, and I suppose this is the confidence boost maybe Bagnaia needed after lots of non-scores and falling out really at the championship hunt, wasn't it? He managed to finish ahead though of fellow Italian in his first year, Marco Bezzecchi, to take a maiden podium. I mean, what a result! The elation in the pen afterwards, wasn't it? Between both the Italians celebrating, two mates as well off track. Fantastic ride from Bezzecchi.
Yeah, not much you can say about that, is there? It was a great ride, and he looked in control all of the time. So, I mean, Bezzecchi, brilliant. I mean, that's all you can say, really. It was. Let's hope he can repeat it. It's always one of them ones where Assen's a funny old place. You talked about Vinales a bit earlier on. When was the last time he had a podium? Assen for Yamaha. So, if you got that muscle memory for that place, you can come up with the goodies. It's not the track it was. You've heard me bang on about that before. They've trimmed a fair bit off of it, but the bit that's left is still pretty damn good and still recognised as one of the best tracks on the calendar.
There's a great quote from Bezzecchi after the race where he said, you know what, it's not... their rider coach at VR46, I should say, told him, look, it's not raining until it hurts the back of your neck. And so that's why when those spots were falling, he was just closing on Bagnaia. And Bagnaia did say it was a bit tense there for a moment because he knew how strong Bezzecchi is. And that was the moment when Bezzecchi believed he could keep that podium as well. Maybe not catching Bagnaia, but certainly at that moment in time, those few raindrops, 10 laps to go, it sort of played into his hands, and he handled it brilliantly, as you say. For a rookie, this is of course Rossi's first podium, isn't it? The team in the Premier class, so a bit of a milestone there, a good boost for the team for next year. After what was a bit of a disappointing time for Rainey on the other side after that, that scary collision with Mir, it sort of got overlooked with the whole Quartararo Aleix thing, didn't it? But that's one thing we can maybe talk about. No penalty for Mir there. It was a scary moment. It resulted in Marini losing his wing, ruined his race there and then. You can't, where was he? 17th. So it had bigger consequences for Marini than the Aleix incident had for Aleix, if you like. So, so opposite feelings on the two sides of the VR46 team, but certainly Marini said, look, we should build on this and focus on being the best independent team in the second half of the year.
Well, that brings us nicely on, I think, to penalties, doesn't it, Keith? It's worth touching on, as Pete says, no penalty there for that, bizarre incident in the end, wasn't it? And scary between Marini and Mir. But also, after the race, for that collision between Quartararo and Aleix Espargaro, Quartararo has been given a long lap penalty for Silverstone. What do you think? Is it fair?
What you tend to get is people will look at Nakagami's situation. That was deemed a racing incident, and of course, straight back to Quartararo. It's about the subtlety of it as well. I mean, this is where rider stewards come into it. This is where the likes of Spencer should come into his own, really, Freddie Spencer as a steward. Quartararo, it was a rash move. He came from a long way back. There wasn't really the gap there until Aleix picked up and let him have a bit of room when he knew he was coming through. He was wide anyway from where I could see it when I checked the tapes this morning. I looked at the recording tapes, what I'm on about. When I checked the digital recording this morning, I think that it was a rash move. It was a rush of blood. It was early in the race. It was unnecessary at that particular point. Possibly it could be deemed, but I think he came from a bit too far back. If we compare it with Nakagami, and everyone's screaming at the screen now, what about Nakagami? Nakagami made up all his space into turn one where he got himself in trouble. From the start, he launched really well. He didn't come rushing in, sort of gaining loads of space into a corner. He was braking. It looked pretty much like everyone else was by the time he arrived there. and lost the front. So it's a very subtle difference, but I think that Quartararo did deserve the penalty. I mean, that's my opinion again. Opinions are like what? Everyone's got one. But the stewards have to make up their minds.
Quite interesting, wasn't it? Because Fabio, being the straightforward guy that he is, immediately hands up, says, I've made a stupid mistake. And I just remember thinking, the stewards haven't made their decision yet, and you've got a rider basically confessing to a stupid mistake. If I was the team manager, I think I'd be, hang on, Fabio, let's just wait until they decide before we kind of, hands up. And, whether that sways them, I don't know, Keith. I mean,
I don't know whether I read, I mean, I've been so bloody busy since 6 o'clock this morning catching up on what's going on. Did you write that piece on Crash that basically Aleix said that, I thought it was a really good quote from Aleix about the fact that Fabio he's on such a high. He said it's not about arrogance; it's about the belief that he has at the moment. If I'm misquoting your piece, I'm sure, but
no, that's right.
And I think he's absolutely right. Quartararo believes he can walk on water, right to the point where he couldn't. He's done some fantastic things this year so far, and he is on a very high of confidence and understanding of what he can do on that bike until it went wrong. And Aleix, fair dues Aleix. I mean, he was reasonable about the whole thing, and as you've already explained, he's actually gained plenty of points, whereas if it had been a standard race, he probably wouldn't have gained as many points against Quartararo. So it's cost Quartararo in quite a lot of ways, but I thought Aleix he interpreted it really, really well, in that he understands, and probably I think again in your piece, Pete, it was that Quartararo hadn't made allowances for Aleix to be quite as fast as he is now, or the Aprilia is in partnership. So. And these are all things that are constant flowing, aren't they? The ebbs and flows of things that are going on the track. So I think it's a very, very good piece. Very subtle. Everything's very subtle. But you've got to understand what's written underneath the lines almost with what these two guys have just said. And I like that. I think it's, Aleix is now coming to the very peak of his game, and he's in for wins. That bike looks sharp. It looks right. It's fast enough. It turns beautifully, which is why I reiterate Silverstone winner.
I would just say on the whole penalties thing, I think the one area where there seems to be that the riders perhaps don't agree with race direction, and now we hear the Yamaha team manager Meregali was also making clear he didn't agree with the penalty, is you've got the cause, haven't you, and then you've got the consequences. Mm-hmm. And I think where there seems to be this difference is that maybe the stewards are focused on the cause, because quite rightly that's in the hands of the riders, isn't it? That's their mistake, rather than what happens afterwards. And I think the riders, they look at what happened with Nakagami, Rins gets put in hospital with a broken wrist, Bagnaya's race ruined, that's the consequence, and there's no penalty. And then they see, Aleix didn't even fall off, and there's a penalty. And I think you can make the argument for both cases, but maybe that seems to be where the difference is at the moment, that the riders want more of the consequence perhaps taken into account. We had Nakagami, didn't we? He came back and basically said, if I'd have got a penalty, I'd have accepted it. And I think that on the grounds of having taken out the consequence side, again, not the mistake wasn't that big, but the consequences were. So I just think that's, and it's not an easy one to walk, is it? Those two sides. But I think for me, that seems to be where there is this slight dislocation between the stewards and the riders.
Problem you've got is if it's racing incidents, you're always going to, if they're not allowed to race, which is the cause, you can't blindly ignore the consequences, obviously, because any cause that has consequences that are dangerous has to be dealt with in a safe way. But you can't. Is racing a cause? Straight away you get into the subject. It's suddenly a bit of a aggressive. Aleix Espargaro, last corner at Assen, if that had gone wrong, he'd have wiped out two guys, and the consequences would have been horrendous. I mean, it's very, very rare you see on the last lap people of that quality being passed at somewhere as tight as the braking area into even at Assen without there being some coming together. It was an amazing pass by Aleix Espargaro, and I think he's moved on to that plane we've just been talking about with Quartararo. That Quartararo believes he can do virtually anything and escape from virtually anything, and all of a sudden we've got Aleix doing exactly that in the final lap, final corner of the race. I mean, we were in for a cracking time. the good thing about everything right now is that 5 weeks, as you said, Harry, is brilliant. 5 weeks, these guys can get over, losing a limb and grow a new one in that amount of time. It's going to mean that when we get to Silverstone, everybody's going to be fit, and I think we're going to be in for a brilliant. I mean, I was up there a couple of days ago. I did an interview with Stuart Pringle, which was very interesting. Did you know? I mean, it's an interesting one. Did you know that one of the most costly insurance things that a circuit has to have at this real moment in time, it would have been the same for Festival of Speed, it would have been the same for Glastonbury, is insurance against our monarch and our monarch's demise, because of the consequences of that event. She's 96 years old now, God bless her, may she live to infinity, but we know that that's not going to happen. So one of the major costly issues for all big events is now the insurance against our monarch's passing. Which again, these kind of tricky things that are going on in the background that none of us ever realise is going on in the background. But the Silverstone preparations the other day when I went there, the sun was shining. They've had to bring crews in from abroad to actually construct stands because there aren't enough scaffolders in the UK to do what they need at Silverstone. It's manic at the moment. And Stuart Pringle still looks 14. How does he do it? He is the managing director of Silverstone, by the way, folks, just in case you don't know who Stuart Pringle is. You'd miss him quite easily because he's a bloke who looks like a 14-year-old, to be honest. And over the last five years that he's had of managing Silverstone, you would imagine that he might have he might look a bit more like me, slightly less hair, greying, and drawn at the gills. But no, he don't. He seems to thrive on aggravation, does Stuart?
With the insurance thing, then. So is that saying that if the Queen of England sadly passes away, say over the MotoGP Grand Prix weekend, they would cancel the Grand Prix weekend? Is that why they need the insurance?
I think what it does, it allows for any eventuality. I think that it allows for cancellation of tickets or passes, right. Or if there's what would happen if our somebody somewhere knows the protocol and the etiquette for what's happening in that time. And I suppose it depends on time of day, place, and so many other things. There's so many variables. But of course, you need to insure against something like that. It's like insuring for the rain. I mean, all big meetings insure for the weather. It's something that everyone has done in the past. These unforeseen circumstances are what you're insured against. But he said that that's one of their biggest insurance costs at the moment. Now, quite what that covers is anybody's guess, but that's what insurance is there for. It's to cover the unknown, really, isn't it? It's not the expected, but the possible. Whatever is possible, the insurance is there to cover.
Wow. Well, I have to say, I didn't expect to be talking about the Queen and insurance on today's show, but certainly you can get everything in MotoGP land, can't you? Speaking of Aleix, we've sort of covered him off, but I suppose a little bit under the radar compared to Aleix because he's on an absolute whirlwind at the moment. And in fact, in terms of our predictions from last time out, Keith and I, nothing. Pete McLaren, Vinales on the podium, got a point. So Pete, you clearly know. Well, we all thought Vinales would be going well, considering after last time out. But is this the sign of Vinales getting back to his old ways? It was this time last year. I remember in the summer break. Each week we were talking about Vinales. He's lost his head. He's going to be out of MotoGP. Can he survive what he was going through with Yamaha? And it seems he can, and he's coming out the other side of it.
As you say, Harry, total contrast to last year, wasn't it? On the podium again, but it was it was that awkward podium ceremony, wasn't there? With in second place behind Quartararo and Meregali trying to sort of cheer him up, and it was clear there was major problems going on. And then, sure enough, a few days later, we got the confirmation that he'd leave Yamaha at the end of the year, and now here he is, just 1 year later. I don't know what he plans to do when he retires from MotoGP, but he'd be a good rider manager if he's able to see in the crystal ball that in 1 year's time, a bike that wasn't even in the top 5 is going to have, what's he got, 6 podiums now and 1 race win. I mean, 7 if you count Silverstone last year. So, yeah, I mean, it's all turned around, and he looks the happy Maverick that is the fast Maverick, doesn't he? And he's building momentum. He was fast in Germany. He had the setback with the ride height device, but it didn't get him down. He had the bad qualifying in Assen, 11th place, wasn't it? But again, which should have been basically his podium chances over, but it didn't get him down. And he goes well at Assen. He also goes well at Silverstone. He goes well at Misano. So yeah, I mean, this is it's a good time for Vinales. He's now. I'm trying to think how many riders have had 3 podiums with 3 different bikes. There's not many. Rossi, I guess, is probably the last one. Before that, I don't know, but it's not often. Lorenzo didn't do it. On the Honda, he didn't get the podium with a Honda. So he's got something to show for this move now, hasn't he? It's taken a bit longer than we thought, I think, given Aleix's performances. We thought Maverick would be up there, but he's there now. He believes it is just the qualifying that's holding him back. And interesting, he also made clear after the race that he will help Aleix. If Aleix needs help for this championship, come the end of the year, he's made clear, look, I'm here to help Aprilia win this championship. Now, that could be useful because it's hard to see that Quartararo is going to get any kind of help from Morbidelli, Dovizioso, and Darren Binder at the moment. So, yeah, I mean, and as Keith said, Silverstone with Quartararo having this long lap penalty. Now we've seen it costs you about 5 positions on the early laps. Miller at Assen on Sunday. That's the last thing Quartararo needs with the bike that he's got struggling to overtake. So it's going to be a hell of a race at Silverstone. I think Quartararo's ruined his holiday with this penalty. I think it's going to be nagging away at the back of his mind. If he'd have gone on holiday after Sachsenring, it would have been perfect, wouldn't it? It would have just been what a holiday time. Instead, it's going to be gnawing away at him. This penalty that he's got, and I think he's going to fight back pretty hard at Silverstone. But as Keith says, that confidence. It can go over the line if you're not careful. So it should be a hell of a race at Silverstone now, because if people were worried that Quartararo might do one of his start to finish dominations, very unlikely now with this penalty. He's going to have to fight through.
Well, with that race done and dusted before the summer break, Fabio Quartararo does still hold on to the championship lead, 172 points. Now, though, to 151 points for Aleix Espargaro, Johann Zarco, 114 points in third. So there is a bit of a gap there to the top 2 now. But Aleix actually, as you said, with Fabio non-scoring at all and Aleix getting 4th, that did net him a few more points. We'll come back to MotoGP in a moment. Let's go down and have a look at what happened in Moto2 and Moto3, shall we? Because they certainly delivered some excellent racing as well. In Moto2, it was Augusto Fernandez who recovered from a 3rd row start to win the Moto2 Dutch Grand Prix by over half a second, I think it was in the end, as his rivals fought it out behind. His only slip-up, though, of course, Keith, being that he fell over, didn't he? He crashed in Parc Fermé, which is a little bit damp at the end, but can't hold that one against him too much. He won ahead of Ayagura, and Jake Dixon, who took pole, managed to get home on the podium in 3rd.
Yeah, I think the Parc Fermé thing was a racing incident. I don't think he's got a long lap penalty for it, so he's been let off by Freddie for that one. Jake Dixon, I think that 3rd place, great ride from him. I mean, very mature, and again, I think Jake, it's interesting at the moment, isn't it? Because if you think back, not that long, really, not that long for me anyway, when Jake got the kind of wild card Moto2 deal at Silverstone and a couple of races, and now we've got Rory Skinner, who's in the same position come this year. Young Rory I've rated for many a time. I think he's got good attitude, good family behind him. He's fast, obviously. And I think Rory Skinner is about to be given the same kind of opportunity that with American... Was it American Racing that's taken him on? I can't remember who it is. It is American Racing. I can't tell you the kind of conversations I had with Wayne Rainey over American Racing while we were at the Festival of Speed. Maybe that's another podcast all on its own. But actually, Rory Skinner getting that wild card, it just reminds... 2 wild cards, sorry. It reminds me of the time that Jake got those wild cards. And Jake did a really good job at the time. And I remember everybody saying, well, he didn't finish him. He didn't tear any trees up. But he actually did, because dropping into a class like Moto2 is really different. It's not like any other class. Stiff chassis, not particularly fast motorbikes, especially back in the time that Jakey did it. But I think this bike will suit Rory Skinner. I think he'll get on with it fairly swiftly. He knows the track, which will be great as well. And I think Rory Skinner's got he's a lad now he's light, but he's big, and he will get on with this bike. I think it's going to be... And I think about Jake Dixon, 3rd this weekend, good ride, solid points and all the rest of it. He'll be disappointed he wasn't with a chance of winning the race. But Jake's there now. He's in Grand Prix for sure. now people look at him. And what he has done through quite difficult times when it looked like he was going to lose his ride till he had that bang on the head, if you remember, and Passini took over for a while, and Passini proved that the bike wasn't that good, and all the things that Jake was saying about the bike was right. So then they came back after Passini had done his deputising and started to listen to Jake a bit more, and that's when Jake was back on the ramp to greater things rather than redundancy in Grand Prix. But what I like is that through Jake's activities, through Jake's pressure and presence and personality, Rory Skinner's going to get a go. They're looking towards Britain. They're looking towards our shores, which is a great thing because they're not really looking that much towards America. Okay, the American racing team is looking towards Joe Roberts and Cameron Beaubier, trying to bring them on out of the Moto America series over in the States that Wayne Rainey heads, obviously. But really, still, it's not America where the Grand Prix teams potentially are looking. They're still having a little squint at our youngsters here, which I think is a good thing. And again, I know you're going to get onto the Scott Ogden thing as well. I mean, he looking at Scott, he's doing the business, Scott. Okay, didn't have a great weekend at Assen again, but the fact is, he's doing the business. He's there or thereabouts. And people in the paddock, that old bloody boring saying, those that know, they know, you know, or if you know, something like that. I can't remember what it is, but it just annoys me so much I can't remember the phrase. But that's what it's like in the paddock. Those blokes know. Those girls know. They look across at what's going on. They see what performances people are achieving on the type of bike, the team that they're riding for, and they make decisions based on that. And I think that it's significant that they're still looking at these our riders over here.
Certainly is, isn't it? But sadly, one rider who wasn't able to take part, of course, this weekend, Pedro Acosta, not taking part due to breaking his leg in training. So not great for him. Actually, as Keith alluded to, we've got 5 weeks. They reckon that'll be enough to recover for him to bounce back in Silverstone?
That's it. Yeah, I think he should be. I think he'll certainly try anyway. And during that time, everything is going in favour of his teammate, if you like, isn't it? Fernandez. I mean, what's his 3 wins in 5 races or something? He was a bit overshadowed, wasn't he, at the start of the year by Acosta coming in, the rookie star. But his form of late has been extraordinary, and he's now I think he's tied for the championship lead, isn't he? And so it's it's close in Moto2. It's
so close.
Agura, Vietti. Yeah, what is it? 1 point or something between the top 3, isn't it? And as we saw on Sunday, a lot of riders. Keith makes the point. Jake was disappointed with third, and that says it all, doesn't it? About where Jake's whole mindset is now. Third is a disappointment, and that's great because that says what his expectations are. The bottom line is a lot of guys fell out of that lead group, and he didn't, and that was important, I think. And we should also say the other bit. Sam Lowe's had I think it was a problem with false neutrals. That was why he ran on at turn 1, and it. A bit of a dangerous situation. Dangerous being his words. It's something that he wants Triumph to really sort of get on top of. So this must be something, if it's being mentioned publicly like that, it must be something that's cropping up sort of, this isn't a one-off thing, but that's it. That's what happened to Sam in the race there. So, yeah, let's hope they get on top of that. But yeah, certainly Moto2, I mean, it's all to play for. And, Ogura, he's still in there, isn't he? Being spoken about in terms of the LCR seat, but you've got to win races, haven't you? You've got to be either the champion or winning races. I don't know whether I certainly think he's got MotoGP potential, but, would you choose him over Nakagami? We now know there's only 1 seat there, for next year with, Rins is basically having the other seat. It's all but confirmed now with Alex Marquez over at Gresini. So, it's there's a lot on these guys' shoulders. They're fighting for the championship. They're thinking about their futures and everything else. So let's hope, as Keith says as well, we can have Rory Skinner in there. I think just looking from afar on Rory, the thing that impresses me is he's been successful with so many different types of bike, isn't he? I mean, from the British Talent Cup champion and now Super Sport and now BSB, that's the thing that really grabs my attention as well. Someone that's fast on so many different types of bike.
Getting back to the leg break with Acosta, it's the Marquez test, isn't it? It's coming back from an injury like that. Some riders don't come back quite the same. Some riders come back just as strong. So it's the Acosta test for these 5 weeks. Can't wait. He's going to be there.
We can't wait for it. And just to reiterate how tight it is at the top of Moto2, Celestino Vietti heads it. on countback, 146 points, because he's tied with Augusto Fernandez second, 146 points, Ayagura 145 points in third, and then it's 116 points back to Aaron Canet in fourth. So Moto2, wow, all to play for. You mentioned Scott Ogden, Keith, Moto3. Let's move on and chat about that as well. It was Ayumu Sasaki who worked incredibly hard on that bike to keep in touch with the long-term race leaders, Izan Guevara, moved into the lead at the right time, kept his head as everyone else around him battled, crashed out, and he won Moto3 and the Dutch Grand Prix ahead of Vic Guevara and Sergio Garcia with a great comeback ride to get onto the podium.
Yeah, I mean, Sasaki, it's time, isn't it? He's finally won that race. Now we're going to see what he's made of once he's got that monkey off his back, because it is a problem, isn't it? You know, he just needed to get there, Assen, there's no. A race win at Assen is so important, particularly in the mud fight that you're in to the end. I mean, it is dog eat dog through the final few laps of that. I mean, I thought Foggia, I felt sorry for Foggia. I mean, he got himself on the outside of the curb. He got pushed out there. It's all fair in love and war. That's about where we're at when you've got two bikes in the same corner. But that curb looked dangerous. You shouldn't be in a situation where you've run off the edge of the curb and it basically spits you off. I was a bit surprised at that. Now, I've walked the track at Assen often, and I don't ever recall seeing it like that. It obviously was, and it's something that I've missed, but that shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't be so far out of line when your wheel drops over the edge of the curb, because there's no indicator to that. You as a rider don't consider the fact that there's going to be a bloody 4, 5, 6 inch drop or whatever it was that's going to spit you off. You think the curb is going to transit onto the green paint or whatever it is reasonably neatly. So I think that Assen have got a safety issue there. John McPhee sadly fell down when he was in the final. I mean, I don't always feel sorry for John McPhee, but I do a little bit on this occasion, because I think that he got forced back a little while. He was trying to fight back through the last couple of corners, and Munoz again was had a rush of blood to the head and took out the other rider, and John McPhee fell down. I won't say in sympathy, because you don't fall down in sympathy, but you only need to tense just a little bit in a corner like that, and you'll wash the front or lose the back or whatever it might be. But I think although he wasn't touched by anybody and it looked like he fell over all on his own, I think it's one of those situations where you just flinch just really slightly. You won't see it. He'll have known what he did. We've not heard about it afterwards, but it took him out of the race after all that hard work. So I feel a little bit sorry for John McPhee, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, and I think John had taken a different tyre choice. So he was actually, I think he went with the hard tyre, didn't he?
He did.
Sort of bucked the trend a bit, yeah. So it looked like he was up there, wasn't he? But as you say, Keith, you never, until you get to the flag at Assen, anything can happen, as we saw in MotoGP as well.
I mean, Scott Ogden, I hope Scott Ogden doesn't let his head drop a little bit. You know, Scott Ogden has done brilliantly this year. I mean, I really do rate. It's a new team. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes with a new team. It might look all right from everywhere else, but you know, you're still breaking in a new team. It's still working towards its best point at the moment. I'm sure Michael Lavitt is across everything that's going on there. But Scott Ogden is just in that position where he's not quite made the breakthrough, but he's damn near there. He really is. I mean, I think he's had a great year, and I hope that he gets the kind of continuity that he needs into next year. I mean, you know, I hope that he gets the ride, the team, the backing that he deserves, because I think he is a future Grand Prix rider and deserves to be.
Well, they're certainly riding well, apart from, and sadly not finishing that race. But at the top, Sergio Garcia extends the lead, 182 points ahead of Izan Guevara, second 179, and then there's a bit of a gap back to Dennis Foggia, 115. So Moto3 seems to be heating up nicely as well as we go into the break. Back to MotoGP, and Pete just brought it up a few moments ago. Of course, we did have confirmation that we will at least get one Marquez for sure on the grid next year, Keith, in the form of Alex. Confirmed he's going to join Gresini Ducati from LCR Honda. He's going to race a factory spec Ducati machine alongside Fabio Di Gianantonio, and this kind of perhaps brings more and more flavour to maybe Miguel Oliveira joining the new Aprilia outfit. And as we say, LCR, well, Rin's one of those seats, still unconfirmed, maybe Mir for the other one. But I think this is a good move for Alex.
I think it's probably one of the only moves for Alex. I mean, it's a situation that he's getting a factory bike in a very crowded market, and I think that he's made a good few unforced errors, and I wondered how much they might count against him as we move forward. And it's a situation, you mentioned it earlier, Agura coming up. Does Nakagami continue with his ride, or does Agura take over? It's a very tricky one at LCR at the moment to work out who gets that factory ride too. I think it's a good ride for Rins. I think that, and I think he'll go well on it. I think he needs a positive. We'll see how he treats the rest of this season now. I mean, when you've got a mindset, you're working with Suzuki, it's all looking like they're going in the right direction, and then you get this bombshell that comes one Sunday in the summer that says you've not got a deal anymore. When you were moving towards, it's a hell of a thing to get over and to still race at the very top line level. I mean, where we are with this, the racing is so close, it's so tight. You need that extra little bit in your mind that carries you those few hundredths of a second a lap, more. And that's not a physical thing. That's not a mechanical thing. That's in your head. And as soon as somebody starts interfering with your head by telling you you've not got a job, and you've got all those negotiations, all that stuff that's going on behind the scenes, all that extra stuff that normally your management might be looking after, you've got to consider as well, what's the best deal for me? Am I going to get on with the Ducati? Am I going to get on with the team? Am I going to be able to take some of my team members from Suzuki with me so that I've got some continuity in understanding of what I want from a bike and what I want from my side of the garage? All that stuff really does interfere. And especially since we've been back to back at the moment with races, so you haven't hardly had any time to think about all this stuff. He's done the deal now. He can go into this summer break and focus on his fitness and training for the final push to the end of the year. Great, that's the way you want it. He's going to be relaxed when he comes back. Let's see what Rins has got in the final half of the year on the bike he won't be riding in 23.
It looks like what's sort of leaning Rins towards this Honda deal is having a 23 spec bike. That seems to be what clinched it as far as the team that he wants. And then as far as it sounds like it'll be announced shortly, but it seems like Rins has pretty much said that's short of signing. That's where he'll be going. And then as far as Alex Marquez and Gianantonio, of course, being signed at Gresini, the first official satellite seats to sign. That moved pretty quick, the whole Alex Marquez thing. I mean, he wasn't really being rumoured, and then suddenly it sort of broke out there that he was in talks with Gresini. They'll be on GP22s, so they'll be riding the bikes from the end of this year, if you like, the factory bikes from the end of this year. Interesting to see what he'll do on it, isn't it? Of course, he was on the podium with Repsol Honda in that first year, and then he's really struggled since he moved. He got moved to LCR even before he competed a race lap, didn't he? They sort of replaced him for the following year with the COVID delayed 2020 season. But I mean, it'll be a big season for him next year. He'll be on a bike, the Ducati. It's now an all-rounder. You can pretty much rely that it's going to be competitive. We've seen what Bastianini's done on a year-old bike. We've seen what Di Giannantonio's done on a year-old bike. Bezzecchi's now been on the podium on a year-old bike. So, the material is there. He needs a change, after being at Honda for all this time and really some tough years at LCR. So, let's see what he can do there. As you say, he secured his places. The other satellite team places at the moment are technically still available. So, I think there'll be some announcements during the summer break, though. So we'll know a bit more. But certainly, Alex Marquez and Di Giannantonio are the first to sign on the dotted line, should we say.
Well, let's hope that change of scenery does bring some upturning results for Alex Marquez. I'm sure during the summer break we will get some more announcements and we'll keep you abreast of all those as well. We'll leave it there for now at the moment, but quite a few weeks off at the moment, but we will be here keeping you up to speed with everything that's going on. Also, send in your questions, but actually we could use your help. So if you want anything in particular that you want us to talk about, any topics, have you got an opinion that you want us to debate, get involved with, do let us know in the comments section and send us a message. Just search at Crash MotoGP. We'd love to hear from you because we've got, a few weeks off before there's any racing action to go again. So we'd love to get your thoughts on that. But in the meantime, as ever, make sure you are tuned in across crash.net for all the latest news and analysis across the week. And we'll be back with you next week. Get your questions in. everything else as well. Comment section, you can tweet us, Instagram us, or Facebook us as well. All you have to do is search Crash MotoGP. And please do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts as well. And we shall see you right back here next week from myself, Harry Benjamin, Keith Huewen, and Pete McLaren. Bye-bye.